Liam Graves had never broken anything in class before. But then again, he had also never completely forgotten an exam until today. The Orion Galactic Academy hummed with activity as hundreds of alien students worked on their midterm projects. Sparks flashed, tools clinked, and the air smelled of hot metal and resin. Every student around him was busy, focused, and confident. Everyone except the lone human sitting frozen in front of a pile of random materials: wood, stone, and vines. Liam stared at them, waiting for inspiration that refused to come. His hand stayed still. His brain offered nothing but static. At the front of the workshop, Professor Rintor, a tall reptilian alien with 6 eyes and 4 arms, watched over his class. His scales shimmered like dull bronze, and his voice carried the kind of authority that could silence a room with one word. "You have 1 hour," Rintor announced. "Construct a functional, non-powered melee weapon from the materials provided. No plasma, no energy cells, no nanoforges. Only your hands and your skill." The professor's claws tapped the table. "Show me that you understand survival. Show me you can build something that keeps you alive." Liam's stomach twisted. He had completely forgotten this midterm was today. Around him, his classmates began their work. The alien to his left, a glass-skinned creature named Klee, projected a floating blueprint in the air. Its design was elegant, full of perfect angles and precise measurements. Another student, a massive stone-bodied being called Drak, carefully chipped away at a chunk of volcanic glass, his movements painfully slow but precise. Even Blinn, the blob-like shapeshifter, seemed to be doing something, though his constant bubbling noises didn't sound like success. Liam, meanwhile, sat frozen. His heart pounded. His thoughts were a blur of panic. 48 minutes left. He tried to remember the professor's lectures, something about grain patterns, weight balance, and shock absorption. It was useless. The more he thought, the less sense it made. He looked at the wall clock again. 38 minutes. Still nothing. Professor Rintor paced slowly between the stations, his long tail swaying with the calm confidence of someone who had seen centuries of failure. His 4 arms pointed out mistakes in 4 directions at once. "No, that angle is wrong. You're overthinking it. Simplicity saves lives," he barked at one student before turning to another. When he stopped beside Liam, the human froze. "Problem, Graves?" the professor asked. Liam straightened. "No, sir. Just planning." Rintor's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "Planning is for before class. Building is for now." He moved on, leaving the human to stew in silence. 29 minutes. Liam picked up a piece of wood, turning it in his hands. It was solid, rough, and completely uninspiring. He tried to remember anything useful from his childhood, maybe a memory of camping with his father, or a survival video he'd watched years ago. Nothing helped. 15 minutes. His classmates were halfway done. Klee's weapon glowed faintly from its precision-cut joints. Drak's stone blade looked almost complete. Zyra, the plant-based student, was weaving something delicate from vines, probably too delicate to hurt anyone. Liam's hands trembled. Sweat gathered on his forehead. His thoughts blurred together. He was going to fail. Fail this class. Fail the academy. Fail humanity's entire reputation. The only human at the most advanced school in the galaxy. And he couldn't even make a stick sharp. His pulse thudded in his ears. And then, as his gaze drifted aimlessly, it landed on the table he was sitting at. 4 wooden legs. Simple, sturdy, and holding him up all this time. Something ancient stirred in the back of his mind. A whisper from a far older part of humanity. A thought so simple, so raw, that it cut through the noise of panic. "Break the leg. Make it pointy." Liam blinked. "That's stupid," he muttered under his breath. But the idea wouldn't leave. Before he could talk himself out of it, he stood up, flipped the table, and looked at where one of the legs joined the top. He saw a small crack in the joint, weak enough to break. He braced his foot on the table and pulled. Crack. The sound echoed across the workshop. Every head turned. Sparks stopped flying. Tools froze midair. Even the hum of the ventilation seemed to pause. Liam stood there, breathing hard, holding a broken table leg in both hands. Klee's reflective eyes widened. Did he just break furniture? Drak rumbled in confusion. He broke his table. For what purpose? Liam didn't answer. His hands moved on instinct now. He found a shard of volcanic glass that had fallen from Drak's bench and began scraping the end of the table leg. Wood shavings fell. The rough splinters smoothed into a jagged point. Minutes passed in silence. The human carved, sanded, and shaped until the tip was sharp enough to make even the professor raise a brow. Then Liam stood, sweat-covered, holding his creation high. "I'm done," he said simply. Professor Rintour approached, staring at the crude weapon. It was ugly, splintered, uneven. But when he tested it with a jab through the air, the sharp tip whistled past his ear. The professor blinked slowly, all 6 eyes narrowing. "This," he said, "is the most barbaric thing I have seen in decades." Then he smiled, just a little. "But it will work." The room stayed quiet after the crack. Then whispers rose like insects. Klee's feelers trembled. Drock tilted his stone head, confused. Blinn burbled in worry. A few students snickered. One muttered, "Human vandalism." Another added, "Primitive display." Liam kept his eyes on the point of his spear. His hands were steady now. Panic had burned away and left calm. He had a tool. It was ugly, but it was real. Professor Rintour turned the spear in his claws. The shaft was uneven. The point was sharp but rough. He gave it a short thrust into the air. The tip whistled. He grunted. Crude. A pause. Also deadly. Murmurs grew louder. Some laughed to save face. Some looked angry that the human had finished first. Rintour lifted one arm, and the noise died. "Bench inspection is over. Field test begins. Training yard. Now." They filed out under the white lights and into the open practice ground. The false sun hung low, throwing long shadows from the crash dummies lined in rows. Gel targets looked like pale torsos set on posts. Around the yard stood frames of composite bone and fiber. The air smelled like dust and oil. Rintour tapped his datapad. "One at a time. Present weapon. Strike target. If your design fails, you fail. If you hesitate, you fail. A non-powered weapon that cannot bite is junk." His eyes swept the line. Klee stepped forward with a bundle of polished pieces. It should have been a staff blade with sliding locks. On the table, the idea had sung. In her hands, the joint stuck. A pin refused to seat. She forced it. The pin bent. The head wobbled. She tried to swing. The blade clacked sideways and fell off. Klee froze, antenna drooping. "I can repair." "Not in a fight," Rintour said, voice flat. Next, Drock came with a black shard set on a stick. It gleamed like night water. He threw with careful aim. The shard flew straight, bit the gel, and shattered. Dust sprinkled the ground like dark snow. Drock's shoulders sank. Zyra, leaf-haired and gentle, lifted a woven vine loop. "A restraint," she said. "You asked for a melee weapon," the professor replied. She hurled the loop. It wrapped the dummy's arm, tightened, then slipped free. Zyra winced. Next, Blinn rolled forward in his containment suit, proud of something hidden inside. The suit quivered. A metal slat slid out, then slurped back in. He burbled, mortified. "It keeps dissolving." Liam stepped up last. He felt their eyes on his back, hot and heavy. He set his feet. He did not think about theory. He thought about force and direction. He thought about not missing. He gripped the spear. He ran 3 steps, planted, and drove the point with both hands. The tip slid into gel with a wet sound and kept going until the wooden shoulder met the fake flesh. The dummy rocked. The spear held. Liam's breath shook in his chest. He pulled the shaft free, threads of gel stretching and snapping. Rintour nodded once. "Functional." He looked at the class. "Remember that word. Beauty fails. Equations crack. Function keeps you breathing." Klee's eyes reflected the yard, small and shaken. "But the design can live in a book," he said. "You live out here." They repeated the test with repairs and second tries. Some improved. Most did not. Liam stood by, spear at his side, and watched. He saw fear in alien faces that had never known cold rain or thorny brush. He saw hands trained for benches, not ground. He felt a small, guilty heat in his chest. Not pride. Something older. Human stubbornness waking up and stretching. Cleanup was quiet. Shaving scraped. Fragments swept. Klee hovered near Liam, awkward. "Your process," she said softly. "You skipped diagnostics. You skipped stress models." "I skipped failing to start," Liam said. He kept his tone gentle. "I was frozen. So I moved." Drock approached too, massive hands clutched together. "I measure. I still break." "How do you break the right thing?" "Start with something you can afford to lose," Liam said. He lifted the spear. Then make it earn its keep. Runtor clacked a claw on the bench. Eyes front. He lifted Liam's spear again, almost like a prop. This is an insult to craft, he declared. Liam braced for the blow. It is splintered. It is ugly. It is offensive to anyone who loves a perfect line. He paused, then set it down carefully. It also does the job. He looked at each student in turn. Good enough is not laziness. Good enough is a line you cross to stay alive. He gestured to Klee. Stop designing and start building. To Drock. Break on purpose. Learn the sound. To Zyra. Tie for teeth, not comfort. To Blinn. Know what you can hold, and what will eat you instead. The yard lights dimmed as the artificial evening arrived. A cold breeze slid over the ground like a warning. Somewhere beyond the wall, a siren tested itself and went silent. Rentor's frills twitched. Tomorrow, he said, we leave the bench. Biodome drill. Real terrain. Real time. No power. No crutches. Liam looked at his hands. They were nicked with small cuts. Wood dust lined his nails. The spear leaned against the table, patient and plain. He felt the old whisper again, steady as heartbeats. Keep it simple. Keep it sharp. Keep moving. Klee glanced at him, then at the spear. Primitive, she said, but her voice had changed. Less mockery. More respect. Primitive is just the first word for proven, Liam said. Above them, the academy's glass ceiling reflected their shapes, small figures under a giant sky. Inside that mirror, the human held an ugly stick, and for the first time since the exam began, he did not feel small at all. The next morning began too bright and too quiet. The workshop smelled faintly of polish and burnt resin, a sure sign someone had ordered a cleanup. Liam arrived early, but the professor was already there, pacing. Rentor's scales shimmered a darker bronze than usual, his frills twitching with irritation. She's coming, he said simply. Who's coming? Liam asked, setting his pack down. Director Vaila Myrix. The professor replied, each word heavy as iron. Head of the academy. She believes practical courses like mine are a waste of resources. She will inspect our progress today. The door hissed open with a soft sigh. Director Myrix glided in, tall and chrome smooth. Her body a seamless fusion of machine and intellect. Her face reflected the entire room. Rows of benches, nervous students, the dull shine of Liam's crude spear leaning against the wall. Professor, she began, her voice precise, melodic, and cold. This is the famed survival crafting course. I expected more sophistication. Her gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on the students. I see chaos disguised as learning. Rentor bowed slightly, but his jaw tightened. We train for situations where sophistication fails, Director. When all you have left are your hands and fear. How charming, she said dryly. But the Academy's purpose is advancement, not primitive nostalgia. Tell me, what advancement does breaking furniture teach? Every eye in the room turned toward Liam. His stomach dropped. The director's mirrored face tilted. Ah, she said, spotting the splintered table leg. So this is your great innovation? Liam swallowed. It worked. Her metallic fingers traced the jagged wood. Worked, she repeated softly. You call this a weapon? Rentor stepped forward before Liam could speak. It functioned. It pierced the gel dummy when others failed. It met the requirements. Director Myrix let the spear drop onto the table with a hollow thud. Function, yes. But art? Precision? Efficiency? None. If the Academy teaches children to smash furniture, perhaps the funding committee should reconsider where its credits go. Rentor's scales rippled in irritation. Perfection does not keep you alive, Director. Adaptation does. Adaptation, she echoed. Is that what you call regression? The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension. The students looked from teacher to director like witnesses to a brewing storm. Myrix turned and paced slowly through the workshop. Her metal feet made no sound, but each step felt sharp. She stopped at Klee's bench, examining her half-finished, delicate staff. At least this shows intelligence, she said. Form, symmetry, design. A civilized creation. Then she turned back to Liam's workbench, where the spear rested. And this, she said softly, is an insult to civilization. Liam felt heat rise in his face, but before he could speak, the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice, then the floor trembled. A low alarm wailed in the distance. Professor Rintor's frills stiffened. That's not a test alarm. Myrix frowned. A power fluctuation, nothing more. Continue your. Another tremor cut her off. This one stronger. The overhead lights sputtered, flickered, and died, plunging the room into half-shadow. Tools rattled. A shelf of metallic parts clattered to the ground. Then the Academy's internal broadcast crackled to life. Warning, attention. Containment breach in Biodome Sector 7. All personnel remain in designated safe zones. Myrix froze, her mirrored face reflecting the red warning light pulsing overhead. Sector 7, she said slowly. That's the xenobiology wing. Rintor hissed under his breath. They were running high-threat simulations this week. Class for creatures. The director straightened. Remain calm. Security will handle it. I will. A deafening crash shook the corridor outside. A sound of metal tearing, followed by a wet growl that didn't belong in any laboratory. Something slammed against the workshop door from the outside, hard enough to dent the reinforced frame. Gasps spread through the class. Myrix's calm composure cracked for the first time. That wasn't in the containment plan. The professor barked, away from the door. Back wall now. His voice carried command that left no room for doubt. The door bulged inward with a second impact. Klee clutched her half-assembled weapon, trembling. Drock lifted a heavy steel rod, stone muscles tensing. Zyra's vines twitched nervously around her arms. Blyn's gelatinous body quivered like liquid glass. And Liam looked at his spear. A table leg with a sharp end. Just wood and instinct. But it was something. The third impact blew the door open in a shriek of metal. For a heartbeat, the hallway beyond glowed red from warning lights. Then a shape filled the frame. Something tall, too many limbs, skin like stretched bone and muscle cords, eyes that burned chemical orange. A creature engineered for terraforming cleanup, a hybrid predator meant to survive hostile worlds. It screeched. Students screamed. Rintor shoved a bench over, blocking the first swipe of claws. Metal tore. Run, he roared. To the yard. Move. They scattered. Chairs toppled. Sparks flew. Klee stumbled, nearly falling, but Liam grabbed her arm and yanked her up. Go. He was the last to leave. As he reached the door, the creature lunged again. Its claws slashed the air where his head had been. He dove through, rolling across the corridor floor, the spear clutched tight. The creature followed, its breath a hiss of acid. Director Myrix stood frozen at the hall's far end, her perfect composure shattered by something like disbelief. Security, she barked, though everyone knew help wouldn't come fast enough. The professor shouted over the chaos. Containment doors to the yard. Move. Students sprinted, panting, through flashing red corridors. Liam followed, heart hammering. He could hear the creature's claws scraping the metal floor behind him. As the last of the students burst into the training yard, Rintor slammed the emergency seal, locking the door. The pounding began instantly. Zyra gasped. Professor, what is that thing? Rintor's voice was low, grim. Something that never should have left its cage. And as the door trembled under another blow, Liam tightened his grip on the crude spear and thought, it's still just wood and a sharp end. But maybe that's enough. The pounding on the sealed door grew louder, like a heartbeat of metal and rage. Each strike made the reinforced frame bow a little more. The air inside the training yard buzzed with fear. The false sunlight above flickered as the emergency systems rerouted power. Shadows stretched long across the cracked floor. Professor Rintor stood with his back to the students, for arms tense, all 6 eyes fixed on the shaking door. His voice was steady, but his frills trembled. Listen carefully. That thing outside isn't an animal. It's a bioconstruct, half flesh, half weapon. It hunts by movement and scent. Stay still until I say otherwise. Klee's voice quivered. But Professor, if it's half weapon, how do we fight it? We don't, Rintor said flatly. We survive. The next strike made the entire yard echo. The door hinges groaned. A long crack spread down the wall beside it. Liam's fingers tightened around his spear. The rough wood dug into his palm. He could hear his own heartbeat louder than the alarm. A hiss, then a deep metallic tear. The door burst inward. Fragments of steel skittered across the ground. The creature that stepped through moved like a nightmare. 6 limbs, each joint bending wrong. Its hide shimmered with wet armor, muscle fibers twisting under translucent skin. Its eyes glowed molten orange, fixed directly on the nearest moving shape. Zyra screamed. The creature lunged. Rintor moved faster than Liam had ever seen. He threw himself sideways, shoving Zyra down. Claws raked across the professor's side, tearing scales and drawing black blood. He hit the floor hard, gasping. "Run," he shouted. "Get out of the yard. North gate." The students scattered, panic breaking discipline. Drock grabbed Zyra and lifted her with both massive arms. Klee darted behind him, her antenna twitching wildly. Blinn sloshed toward the wall, his containment suit leaving wet streaks. Liam stayed. His mind screamed at him to flee, but something ancient and human held him there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was instinct. He crouched beside the professor. "Move, Graves," Rintor hissed. "It's coming." The creature's head tilted, locking onto the sound of their voices. It charged. Liam didn't think. He swung. The spear met its shoulder with a meaty crack. The jagged glass tip buried shallowly, then snapped. The creature shrieked, spinning in fury. Its claws caught Liam's shoulder and threw him backward into the dirt. Pain flared, bright and white. The broken spear fell beside him. He reached for it, but the creature was already coming again. Then a blur of green vines whipped across its face. Zyra stood behind a broken barrier, hands outstretched. The vines tightened, wrapping around its limbs. "Go," she shouted. "Run now." The monster tore free with a roar, dragging strands of glowing sap. But it gave them seconds. Liam grabbed Rintor under one arm, forcing him to stand. "Come on, Professor. I'm not leaving you." The professor staggered, bleeding but upright. "The canyon," he rasped. "Follow the drainage trench. Narrow walls, can't flank us there." Liam nodded and yelled, "This way." The small group sprinted through the cracked training yard, past shattered dummies and splintered walls. The false sunlight flickered above, bathing everything in strobing red and white. Behind them came the scraping sound of pursuit, claws on metal, steady and fast. They reached the far edge where the practice ground met the biodome's artificial terrain. A stream of recycled water flowed through a narrow canyon, flanked by vines and roots. Liam helped the others down into it. "Keep moving," he said. "Stay quiet." Klee stumbled, catching herself on the vines. Her breathing came fast and sharp. "Why is this happening?" The director said containment breaches were impossible. "Everything's impossible until it isn't," Liam muttered. He looked back. Two orange eyes glowed in the dark opening behind them. The thing was following. The group pressed deeper into the canyon. Overhead, the biodome lights flickered again, dimming to a sickly amber. Steam hissed from ruptured vents, filling the air with the metallic taste of ozone. "Here," Drock shouted. The trench curved into a narrow choke point where two stone outcroppings met. "We can hold it here." Rintor grunted approval, leaning against the wall, clutching his wound. "Yes, a funnel. Only one can enter at a time. Graves, prepare your weapon." Liam glanced down at the broken spear. The glass tip was gone. All he had left was splintered wood. He tightened his grip anyway. "It's better than nothing." Klee's eyes reflected the dim light. "You can't fight that with a stick. Watch me." They could hear the creature's claws scraping closer now, echoing through the narrow stone walls. The sound wasn't just movement, it was confidence. It knew they were trapped. Liam's thoughts raced. He looked around. The walls, the vines, the scattered bits of pipe and rock. "We can make traps," he said quickly. "Trip lines, barriers, anything that slows it down." Zyra hesitated. "You think vines can stop that thing?" "Not stop," Liam said, "but maybe make it stumble." Drock grinned, a deep rumble from his chest. "I can make rocks fall." "Good," Liam said. "Do it." They worked fast, fear sharpening their focus. Klee wove vines into crude snares. Zyra spread resin along the ground to make it slick. Drock pried chunks of stone from the wall, stacking them into a low barrier. Even Blinn positioned himself like a living puddle across part of the path, his voice bubbling nervously. "I will try to be sticky." Rintor watched them, pride flickering through his pain. "Now this," he muttered, "is learning." The first shadow moved across the canyon entrance. The creature crawled in, its limbs scraping the stone. Its breath came in hisses, its eyes glowing like furnace coals. Liam raised his half-spear and whispered, "Remember, don't freeze." The creature lunged. The first vine snapped instantly, but the second one caught. The monster stumbled, its claws tearing at the ground. Drak slammed both fists into the wall, and a slab of rock crashed down, smashing into its back. It screeched, fury shaking the canyon walls. Again, Liam shouted. Zyra hurled another wave of vines. Blinn expanded, coating the ground in glistening gel. The creature slipped, crashed sideways, and for one impossible moment, it was off balance. Liam ran forward. He drove the splintered wood straight into the soft gap beneath its jaw. The impact jarred his arms to the bone. The creature thrashed once, twice, and then went still. Silence. Only the hiss of leaking steam filled the canyon. Liam stood panting, chest heaving, his hands sticky with alien blood. Rintor's voice came softly from behind. Functional, he said. The professor smiled faintly before his knees buckled. Liam caught him just before he hit the ground. In the dim light, surrounded by the shattered pieces of their makeshift defenses, the human looked down at his broken spear. No blade, no polish, no perfection, and realized something profound. It was enough. The canyon was silent for the first time in what felt like hours. Only the soft drip of recycled water broke the stillness. Artificial sunlight from the biodome flickered high above the glass ceiling, filtering through vines that now hung torn and stained. The air smelled of wet soil, alien sap, and something metallic, blood, human and otherwise. Liam's hands shook as he lowered the professor onto a flat rock. Rintor's breathing was shallow but steady. His scales had gone a dull gray-green, his wounds leaking dark fluid. "You're not dying on me," Liam said, his voice harsh from exhaustion. The professor gave a weak laugh that sounded more like a growl. "Humans," he rasped. "You refuse to give up, even when it's irrational." "That's kind of our thing," Liam muttered. He tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound. "You'll be fine. We've got you." Around him, the others were quiet. The fight had burned the panic out of them, leaving only tired focus. Drak sat cross-legged, massive and still, holding a chunk of broken stone that glowed faintly from the creature's blood. Klee's reflective eyes kept darting to the canyon entrance, every sound making her twitch. Zyra crouched near the professor, her green hands glowing softly as she coaxed her plant cells to release healing enzymes. Blinn was a spreading puddle of translucent gel, reforming himself slowly after using too much of his body in the last fight. His voice bubbled weakly. "That thing was only one." Liam froze. "Only one what?" Rintor's eyes fluttered open. "Class 3 constructs are pack creatures," he said faintly. "They never hunt alone." As if summoned by his words, a distant howl echoed through the biodome. It wasn't a single voice, it was a chorus. Dozens, maybe more. Klee whispered, "They're coming." Liam stood, gripping his broken spear. "Then we finish this here." Zyra looked up, wide-eyed. "We can't fight them all." "We don't have to," he said. "We just need to survive until security gets here." "How long will that take?" Drak asked. Rintor gave a weak, humorless laugh. Knowing the director's efficiency protocols, 40 minutes, minimum. 40 minutes, Liam repeated, scanning their surroundings. "All right, then we make this canyon a nightmare for anything that walks in." He pointed to Drak. "You're our wall. Bring down the edges. Make choke points." To Klee. "You and Zyra. Vines, traps, snares, anything that can slow them down." And to Blinn, "You do what you did before. Be sticky. Lots of sticky." Blinn's surface rippled nervously. "Sticky. Yes, I can do sticky." They got to work. Liam tore down loose cables from the walls, looping them through roots to create trip lines. Zyra wove vines into nets, while Klee laid sharpened stones in shallow pits. Drak used his massive hands to dig trenches and pile boulders, every motion sending small tremors through the canyon floor. Rintor watched from where he sat, eyes half-lidded but alert. "Good," he murmured. "You're thinking. You're adapting. You're terrifying." Liam smirked without looking back. "We learn fast." Minutes later, the first shadows appeared at the canyon mouth. Long, spider-like shapes crawling over the walls and ground. Their eyes glowed in clusters of molten orange. "Positions," Liam called out. The pack entered. The first creature stepped on a hidden line. Vines snapped, and a tangle of debris dropped from above, crushing two under it. The others howled in fury. They charged, claws digging into the ground. Drak slammed his fists into the wall, and half the passage collapsed, funneling the beasts into a single narrow corridor. Klee hurled spikes of hardened resin, while Zyra's vines snaked from every direction, lashing at the creature's limbs. Blinn stretched his form across the center of the path, turning into a glistening pool of translucent glue. The first creature leapt and sank halfway in before realizing it couldn't pull free. It shrieked, flailing as others tripped over it. Liam waited until the biggest one lunged at him. He sidestepped, thrusting his spear with both hands. The wooden shaft bent, but didn't break this time. The jagged end sank into the beast's chest. He wrenched it free and hit again. Every hit burned his arms, but he didn't stop. Humans didn't stop. The air filled with the sound of snarls and impacts, rock shattering, vines tearing, alien screams echoing between stone walls. Klee was thrown backward, crashing into the dirt. Liam grabbed her wrist and pulled her up. "You good?" She blinked, dazed but alive. "Your species is insane." "Thanks," he grunted, swinging his spear again. Zyra screamed, "On your left." Liam turned just in time to see a smaller creature climbing the canyon wall. He hurled his spear like a javelin. It struck the monster mid-leap, driving it into the dirt. Drock roared, his entire body vibrating with anger. He tore loose a boulder the size of his chest and threw it down the narrow path, crushing 3 more creatures in one thunderous impact. The sound echoed like an explosion. For a moment, the pack hesitated. They backed away, screeching, regrouping. Breathing hard, Liam grabbed a new length of pipe from the ground. "They're scared," he said. "Good. Let's keep it that way." "They're not retreating," Klee said softly. "They're waiting." She was right. The creatures stopped just beyond the canyon's mouth, glowing eyes watching. Then, from deeper in the shadows, a larger form emerged, twice the size of the others. Its hide shimmered with metallic armor, and jagged bone spikes ran down its spine. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Liam muttered. Rintor's voice came weak, but sharp. "Alpha construct. Smart. Fast. You can't brute force it." "Good thing I'm not planning to," Liam said. He looked around. The vines were nearly gone, the traps mostly spent. But one thing remained, the support beams embedded into the canyon walls. If they fell, the canyon would collapse. "Drock," Liam said, pointing upward. "See those beams? When I shout, you bring them down." Drock frowned. "That will bury the canyon." "Exactly," Zyra gasped. "Liam, we'll be buried too." He smiled grimly. "Yeah, but we'll be alive under rock." "They won't." The Alpha let out a bone-shaking roar and charged. "Now!" Liam shouted. Drock slammed both fists into the wall. The sound was deafening, a crack like thunder rolling through stone. The supports gave way. The canyon roof collapsed, rocks and debris crashing down in a roaring avalanche. Dust filled the air, blinding light flashing through falling rubble. Liam felt himself thrown backward, the ground shaking beneath him. When the noise finally stopped, everything was still. Coughing, he pushed himself up. His ears rang. A shaft of dusty light filtered through the new cracks above. The air was thick, but breathable. The creatures were gone. Buried. He looked around. Zyra, Klee, Drock, Blinn, all alive, though battered. Rintor still breathed, his scales flickering faintly. Liam leaned against the wall, his body trembling from exhaustion. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Drock said quietly, "You broke the world and survived. I think that's very human." Liam managed a tired grin. "Yeah, we're good at breaking things. Especially when it's the only way to live." The canyon was half ruined now, silent, smoking, and full of ghosts. But for the first time since the breach began, they'd bought themselves something priceless. Time. And somewhere beyond the rubble, alarms began to fade into silence. Dust filled the canyon like fog. Every breath burned. Liam coughed and waved his hand to clear the air. The collapsed walls still groaned softly, small rocks sliding down the fresh mound of rubble. For a long moment, no one moved, as if afraid that even sound might bring the monsters back. Then a faint voice broke the silence. "Is everyone alive?" It was Zyra, her leafy skin smeared with dust. Her vines twitched weakly as she pushed herself up. "Alive," Liam croaked, leaning against the wall. "I think." His chest ached. His shoulder throbbed. He looked around through the haze. "Drock? Klee? Blinn? Here," came Drock's deep rumble, muffled but steady. He stood near the far end, half buried under rubble, but still holding one of the fallen beams like a shield. His stone arms were cracked, glowing faintly from internal stress fractures. "I'm fine," he grunted. "Wall landed on me." "Wall lost." Clee crawled out from behind a slab of rock, her mirrored eyes dimmed but intact. "Systems functioning," she said automatically, then blinked in confusion. I'm okay." Blinn reformed slowly nearby, his gelatinous body dripping from the rocks like melted glass until he pulled himself together. "I lost about 20% of myself," he said weakly. "But I'm regenerating." Slowly, Liam exhaled in relief. "Good. Everyone's still breathing." Rintor stirred where he lay propped against a boulder. "Breathing now," he said hoarsely. "If the ceiling doesn't decide to finish the job later." Liam crouched beside him. The professor's side wound had stopped bleeding, though his breathing was shallow. "Rest," Liam said. "We'll find a way out once we're sure the tunnel's stable." But the professor shook his head. "Listen," he whispered. "It's not over." Liam frowned. "What do you mean?" Rintor's 6 eyes blinked slowly. "You think the Alpha died so easily? That was only one section of its pack. Others are still inside the biodome." The words hit like a punch. "You're saying there's more?" Clee's voice cracked. "How many more?" "Enough," the professor murmured. "Enough to erase this campus if the containment field doesn't reset." Liam looked up at the glass ceiling above, fractured but still holding. Red warning lights flashed beyond it, faint but constant. "We can't stay down here." Drock nodded grimly. "If the field collapses, everything in the biodome will be sterilized." "Meaning?" Clee asked. "Meaning we all turn into vapor," Liam said flatly. They went quiet again. Only the faint hum of damaged machinery filled the air. Zyra touched the canyon wall, her green fingers glowing faintly. "There's a vent line behind this section. A tunnel for maintenance drones." Liam's eyes lit up. "A way out." She nodded. "If we can clear it." Drock stepped forward immediately. "Stand back." He braced himself, then slammed his fist into the wall. The rock cracked. Another punch shattered it completely, revealing a dark, narrow passage lined with cables. Cold air rushed out, carrying the sterile scent of recycled oxygen. "That's our exit," Liam said. But before they could move, a low rumble echoed from behind the rubble pile, the sound of stone shifting. Then a claw burst through, snapping the silence like thunder. Clee screamed. "It's still alive." The Alpha's burned and broken body shoved through the debris, slower now, but not dead. Its head was half crushed, one glowing eye flickering, but the other burned bright with fury. It roared, the sound shaking the canyon. "Move," Liam shouted. They scrambled toward the tunnel entrance. Drock planted himself in front, trying to hold the creature back. The Alpha slammed into him, claws raking against stone skin. Drock grunted, shoving back with all his strength. "Go," he roared. "I'll hold it." "Like hell you will," Liam yelled, grabbing a length of metal pipe from the ground. He sprinted forward, swinging it like a club. The pipe smashed into the creature's face with a dull clang. It turned on him instantly, roaring. The impact threw Liam backward. He hit the wall, pain exploding down his spine. His vision blurred, but he saw the Alpha charging again. He reached for the ground, for anything, and his fingers closed around the broken shaft of his spear, the same piece of wood he'd been carrying since the start. He stood, body screaming in protest. "Come on, you bastard," he whispered. The Alpha lunged. Liam dodged barely in time and drove the splintered end of the spear into the creature's throat, twisting with every ounce of strength he had left. The wood cracked, but didn't break. Black ichor spilled over his hands. The beast convulsed, thrashing wildly. "Now," he shouted. Drock slammed both fists into the canyon wall again. The remaining section collapsed, burying the creature under a second avalanche of stone. The roar turned into a muffled rumble, then silence. Liam stood gasping, the spear still in his hands. The shaft was slick with dark blood, the tip snapped clean. Zyra pulled him toward the tunnel. "We have to go." One by one, they crawled into the narrow passage. The walls buzzed with the hum of damaged circuits. The air was cold and stale. Behind them, the canyon settled again, sealing the way shut. They crawled for what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. Liam's muscles ached. His mind felt heavy and slow. When they finally emerged, they were in a maintenance chamber, sterile, silent, and dimly lit by flickering blue lights. Blinn reformed near a vent and exhaled a trembling sigh. We survived again. Klee leaned against the console. We shouldn't have. None of this makes sense. How did we win with nothing but sticks and stones? Liam wiped his hands on his torn uniform. Because we didn't wait for permission to try. Zyra looked at him, her voice soft. You fought with instinct. No plan, no perfect design. Just belief. Rintor chuckled weakly from where he rested against the wall. Humans, he said. You turned desperation into strategy. He looked at the broken spear still clutched in Liam's hand. That is why you scare people like Director Myrix. Liam glanced at the weapon, splintered, ugly, but still solid. It's not about the weapon, he said. It's about what happens when everything else fails. Through the cracked window above, faint daylight shimmered through the damaged dome. Sirens wailed in the distance, but weaker now, fading as security finally arrived. Zyra sighed in relief. We made it. Liam looked back down the dark tunnel behind them. Yeah, he said quietly. But something tells me this isn't over. Far below, deep under the rubble, a faint orange light flickered, the Alpha's remaining eye, still glowing in the dark. The world beyond the maintenance tunnel was eerily quiet. The alarms had stopped. The air smelled of ozone, melted steel, and damp soil. Faint shafts of artificial sunlight pierced through the shattered biodome ceiling, painting thin golden lines across the wrecked ground. Everything that once looked clean and futuristic now lay in ruin. Cracked glass, toppled trees, and collapsed labs. Liam climbed out first, his uniform torn and his hands raw. Behind him, Klee and Zyra emerged, helping the weakened Professor Rintor. Drock and Blinn followed last, both battered but alive. For a moment, the six of them stood in silence, staring at what used to be the Academy's most advanced training environment. Now it looked more like a battlefield. Zyra whispered, "It's all gone." Rintor's voice was quiet but steady. "And yet, you remain." They started walking toward the central plaza, stepping carefully over twisted pipes and shattered glass. The biodome's great holographic trees flickered, glitching between color and static. Overhead, the false sky tried to stabilize its light pattern, giving everything a strange, dreamlike shimmer. Liam's legs felt heavy. His body wanted to rest, to sleep for a week, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Every step made him remember the screams, the roar of the Alpha, the crash of collapsing stone. He could still feel the weight of the spear in his hands, the rough wood, the jagged splinters biting into his skin. Klee walked beside him, silent for once. Her reflective eyes kept flicking toward him, studying his face like it held the answer to a question she didn't know how to ask. Finally, she said, "Back in the workshop, when you broke the table leg, I thought you were just panicking." "I was," Liam admitted. "Then how did you know it would work?" "I didn't," he said simply. "I just didn't want to freeze again." She tilted her head, antennas twitching. "You call that bravery?" "No," Liam said softly. "I call it being human." Ahead, they saw movement, bright lights cutting through the haze. Security drones floated into view, followed by armored figures carrying plasma rifles. The Academy's insignia glowed on their chests. Relief flooded the group. Finally, the lead officer, a tall avian being with sharp silver feathers, stopped as he saw them. His mechanical visor scanned the group, then focused on Liam's blood-streaked face. "Survivors located," he said into his comm, "Student Group Theta 7. One instructor injured but stable. Multiple casualties reported elsewhere." Director Vaila Myrix arrived moments later, descending from a shuttle like a ghost of chrome and authority. Her polished body reflected the ruins in perfect detail. She looked around at the devastation, her mirrored face unreadable. "Professor Rintor," she said, her tone sharp. "Explain this." Rintor lifted his head. "Containment failed, but my students succeeded." "Succeeded?" Her metallic voice sharpened. "This catastrophe will haunt the Academy's record for decades. You call that success?" Liam stepped forward before he could stop himself. "We survived," he said. "Without your systems. Without your technology. Just with what we had." The director turned to him, her reflection splitting him into two distorted images across her mirrored surface. "And who are you to address me so boldly, human?" "The one who kept your academy from being overrun," he said quietly. "With a stick." Behind him, Drock and Zyra straightened. Klee's hands tightened around the strap of her broken tool bag. Even Blinn raised his liquid head higher. The students stood together, tired, bloodied but unbroken. Rintor smiled faintly. "Director," he said, "perhaps you should inspect the field results before you speak of failure." Myrix's chrome face turned toward the canyon in the distance, still smoking. "You're saying students stopped a pack of Class 3 constructs?" "Not just stopped them," Rintor said. "They adapted, improvised, and won, using nothing but instinct and will." The director's voice was icy. "Instinct is not science." "No," the professor said, "but it's survival." There was a long silence. The wind carried the faint sound of crumbling glass from somewhere far off. Finally, Myrix walked toward Liam. Her mirrored eyes glowed faintly with internal data streams as she scanned the crude, blood-stained weapon still hanging from his belt, the same splintered chair leg he'd started with. "This is your masterpiece?" she asked. Liam nodded. "It's not pretty, but it worked." She tilted her head, almost curious. "Your species fascinates me, human. You destroy to create. You panic, yet produce results. You lack refinement, yet you endure." He met her gaze evenly. "Maybe refinement isn't what keeps you alive." Something in her posture shifted, a faint lowering of the shoulders, a pause before speaking. "Perhaps," she said at last, "there is a lesson here, one I did not expect to learn." She turned to the officers. "Escort the survivors to the medical wing. No debrief until they recover." Then, without another word, she left, her silver form vanishing into the haze. When the noise of her shuttle faded, Rintor chuckled softly. "Well," he said, "that was almost respectful." Zyra smiled faintly. "Do you think she'll actually understand what we did?" "No," Clee said, "but the story will spread. It always does." Rintor looked at Liam. "You realize what you've done, Graves?" He frowned. "Survived?" The professor shook his head. "You reminded the galaxy what humanity is. Unpredictable, reckless, and absolutely unstoppable when cornered." Liam didn't answer. He just looked down at the weapon one last time. The wood was cracked beyond repair, the point dull and broken, but it felt heavier now, like it carried the memory of something greater than itself. He placed it gently on a piece of rubble near the edge of the dome. "Lesson learned," he said softly. Drock tilted his head. "You're leaving it?" Liam smiled. "Yeah, let them keep it as a reminder." Blynn's voice bubbled. "A reminder of what?" "That sometimes the ugliest thing," Liam said, "is the only thing that works." As the security team led them toward the waiting shuttle, the artificial sun above flickered one last time before stabilizing, bathing the ruins in warm light. Hours later, when the cleanup drones arrived, they found the broken spear still standing upright where Liam had left it, planted deep in the ground, defying gravity. Someone, perhaps a maintenance worker or perhaps Rintor himself, had placed a small metal tag beside it. The engraving was simple. Human solution, found functional. And so, in the ruins of a perfect academy, among shattered glass and broken pride, a crude human weapon stood as the most powerful invention of all, not because it was advanced, but because it had worked. The galaxy would remember that lesson.